Welcome to another episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Our co-hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage with consumers online, in-store, and everywhere in between. And now, here are Sri and Peter.
Hello, folks, and welcome to this episode of the CPG Guys podcast. I'm, of course, Sri, one of the aforementioned CPG guys. Now actually a proud parent of two little kitten babies, Zain and Zora, who are basically controlling my life. My co-host and friend who would normally be here is the VP of Partner Strategy and Dev at Fetch Rewards, a mobile loyalty platform. He's unfortunately out with the flu today. Get well, Peter. I know if you were here, we'd be discussing game one of this 2022 baseball season, which actually kicked off today at the time of this recording. Feel better. We'll have you back on another episode pretty soon. So let me remind our audience that all of our content, now close to 200 episodes, may be found by visiting cpgguys.com. If you aren't already following us on LinkedIn, all you have to do is go to a browser, type linkedin.com, and in the search bar, hit CPG Guys. And when you get to our page, simply click follow. That way you'll get to see all of the content we produce. And best thing about it, totally free. Did you know we're in partnership with Next Up, the network of executive women, now rebranded, and in the middle of every Wednesday podcast episode is hidden an Easter egg with a message from Next Up. Download, tune in, listen in. Special thank you to all of you who have made our 11.2K followers and growing. Our astronomical change from 10K to 11K followers happened in less than a month, and I can't say enough times, thank you, thank you, thank you. You shape the show, you tell us what topics we discuss and who to bring on, and that's what we try to do. This is, of course, the second podcast we have launched here, an offshoot of the CPG Guys. It's called the FMCG Guys, which takes the CPG Guys format of Omnichannel digital exploring to the European market. How about that? Our friends Efrain and Danielle are the hosts based in Europe, and we'll be talking with FMCG retail thought leaders about the transformation happening on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean over in Europe. Today, I'm looking forward to a discussion with an old friend from my Revlon days back in 2019 when I was working in New York City. I met him and he was actually a DMM for Amazon for mass beauty, skincare, personal care, cosmetics, hair care, fragrances, and those categories. We would often iterate on category development and how we could incubate a brand on the 1P platform of Amazon. I really enjoyed my visits, and some days I would go just to meet the guy and to the day one building and working with him. Welcome to the show now, VP of Commercial Operations at Spectrum Brands, none other than my old buddy, Mr. Mir Zaman himself. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Sri. Good to see you again, albeit virtually. But, thanks for inviting me to the show. It's a very enjoyable show. I listen to it quite often. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Mir. And yes, albeit virtually today, but I'm very sure I have a good feeling, man. We're going to be together soon.
Yep. Looking forward to it.
Before we get into the question and answer part of this podcast, Mir, would you mind telling us first where we can find you online and where people can learn more about Spectrum Brands, and then give us a brief overview of your role itself?
Yeah. So Spectrum Brands, you can find us www.spectrumbrands.com. And we have 4 different business units or divisions. So you'll have products or brands. We have 40 plus brands there that you can learn about. And in terms of the role, it's basically a central organization that focuses on omnichannel digital disruption, making things work for a CPG company that has so many brands, and some of those are quite iconic, Remington being one. I'm just wearing the jersey for it. But in general, the idea is that my team helps business units be successful online, as well as in an omni environment. We do it through 5 different specific pillars, starting with e-commerce sales and operations, and then going to digital content development and delivery, media and merchandising. So look at social media, e-com media, and merchandising of it. Also revenue and profit management, and at the end, insights and analytics, because those are such important aspects for you to really be effective in the omni environment. So that's basically what we do. and we own co-own the P&L for all of Omni sales, e-com sales.
Wonderful, Mir. Thank you so much for that for all our listeners. Everything Mir said, including his LinkedIn page, the links of the website he referred to, will be in the episode digital liner notes of this podcast. So let's jump right in, Mir. And the first one I'm going to tee up for you is obviously my high intrigueness. You went to school for aerospace engineering, and then you were a NASA rocket scientist. How the heck does one go from being a NASA rocket scientist to a DMM at Amazon in skincare and beauty, and then be the VP of commercial operations for 30 brands at the same time? How did that happen? Take us through this fascinating journey.
Well, I grew up in Bangladesh, and when I was growing up, I was watching space shuttle launches on our TV newses, and I used to tell people that I want to work on space shuttle, and people used to just laugh at me because from there coming to US working at NASA is kind of unheard of. So, but I kind of pursued that curiosity and dream, through and through. Went to school at Purdue University and graduated from there. And coincidentally, I was working on a problem at that time when the Columbia accident happened, which was quite tragic, but the space shuttle program was grounded for 2 years. So the area I was focusing on was directly related to getting back to flight. So I was able to, get my foot in the door, and then work there for almost 8 years, 30 plus, shuttle launches later. The program ended, and then I decided that, what do I do next? I kind of felt like I achieved my dream. So I thought that I like problem solving. I have curiosity, so why don't I go in the business world and see if I can solve problems continuously? So, post business school, went to consulting for about 5 years, which is kind of a hunting ground for problems and working on those. And then got recruited away by Amazon, starting to own a P&L on Amazon, marketplace side for watches business. So that's kind of how I got my foot in the door in Amazon. And Amazon was perfect company coming out of consulting because it was kind of scrappy. They give you a lot of revenue to manage, but not a lot of people to manage it with. So you have to be very creative with your time and problem solving skills. So it was fantastic. And I got to move around within Amazon in the home furnishings categories, led some projects for Bezos S teams, and then eventually went into beauty, which was fascinating because I got to learn so much about these iconic brands, manufacturers that have been doing business for 100, 200 years. And it was just an amazing journey. And the end piece, the story of that in Amazon was Amazon ads. So I kind of rounded up my knowledge from category management, P&L management, to learning about the best media platform that you could find when it comes to online. So online sales. So it was a perfect journey. And then I thought, if I've been preaching all this to my buddies on the other side, why don't I go practice it actually? So that's when the opportunity for Spectrum came around, and based on what they were wanting to do, it was a perfect match. So I ended up joining Spectrum.
Fascinating indeed. The journey from Bangladesh to making. The most important thing you said though there was you made your dream come true and you pursued it and you made it happen. And I didn't actually know that you worked on these space shuttle launches. That is, I haven't met anybody who's done that. So
I used to be in mission control. Yeah, I used to be, because the thermal protection system was my area. So I had to give a go, no go for a lot of those launches.
We'll make sure our audience knows that we actually had someone who's in mission control. So, now you're here at Spectrum Brands, your career has evolved, you're now part of the CPG industry. What is your role as a commercial leader? What are the teams that you work with every day? What partnerships do you establish internally? And who are those people you work with?
It's a great question. So my organization, sits centrally. So primarily works with sales and marketing and business unit presidents, leadership. But then as an enabling mechanism, what we do is work with supply chain, finance, and other organizations to make sure that some of the changes that you need to make come from shifting from a brick and mortar mindset to more of an omni mindset. What are those transformations needed, and where do you lead with insights and actually make those changes happen? So I work cross-functionally, within the company. But I have a seat at the table with the senior leaders so that my team can drive through insights and make recommendations and eventually see through some of those outcomes. So that's really the goal. Just barely scratching the surface and solving problems there, because there's so many of those, and especially in these days. We have the supply chain challenges and inflation, all that. And given this, I pull back to my aerospace days. When you actually, try to solve a problem, you make a bunch of assumptions based on the physics theories or whatever. But then those assumptions sometimes don't get fully tested at the extremes. And right now, if you see the supply chain environment, you could actually test some of those extremities of assumptions that you've had. So, there's big, opportune time for us to rethink the way we've been doing things and how things are working in the past. And I think we have to drastically change that. So fascinating for me, even though it's problematic for a lot of folks, but I like that part, and that's a challenge, but it's a cross-functional challenge, so to speak.
Mir, knowing you, I wouldn't have expected anything different, that it would be a challenge. Any guy who heads here all the way from Bangladesh to pursue a dream to be on mission control of NASA and be part of space shuttle launches is going to want to do something really interesting. I don't think we can debate that. And speaking of that, very interesting, nowadays it feels the word omnichannel is everywhere. And you even spent time as an Amazon DMM in this omnichannel space, buying product every day and then merchandising it. Is omnichannel the only way forward? And what capabilities are a must-have to be successful in that journey, since you're doing it every day?
Yeah, omnichannel, there's no way about it. We have to think omni, and we have to think omni from the inception, from the beginning to the commercialization. So even if you don't have the economics of the product work out in online sales, doesn't mean you don't do omni, right? Means you still provide information, you engage with consumers online, you still talk to them about how the product quality is and what they think about your product. So it may not be from a purchase standpoint for every item you sell, but for everything that you put your hands on in terms of development of the product and eventually selling it in any channel, you should think about omni. The capabilities that come to mind, I can name a few. One of the things that I think is really CPG companies especially, we need to think about how do we segment our channels. Who are our top customers? And if you grew up in a brick and mortar, sometimes pure play Amazon or others were not really in a consideration set because the volume of sales was so low, right? But they've been growing in such an enormous way, and they require a lot of change upstream or within your organization. You really have to put them in the top mix of those customers or channels that you're going to work with. So starting from there, you need to think about your assortment, format, packs, price packs, value. How do you do your pricing? How do you do packaging? And your supply chain in terms of how do you fulfill. So all of those you need to think about. And then when it comes to content, you need to have content that are going to be engaging, that are specific to the product, talking to the consumers in a particular way, getting ratings and reviews. So old days, back to my shuttle days, we would have a checklist for a go no go launch, right? For a particular shuttle launch, you almost need to do that in the omni sense. In any product you launch today, you have to think about what that checklist is and how do you start to engage with consumers on day one, and how does that transfer into your commercialization of your product. Think about e-com media. It's not an afterthought anymore that, yes, eventually I'll put some money to drive search results. It's actually a full funnel media that you have to think about, in different stages of the engagement you have. And then end of the day, economics must work out. So you have to look at your P&L impact. So assortment rationalization and having the right type of assortment at the right channel is super important. Beyond all this, you need talent. You need to have talent that is actually curious, wanting to solve problems that they haven't solved before, and wanting to go learn and bring best practices from others, because there's so much happening in this space right now. If you don't have a talent base that's able to adapt quickly and make changes quickly and do experiments and learn from experiments and kind of scale from there, it'll be very hard for you to do well in this space. So those will be few of those things that comes to mind.
He says it so casually, just a few of those things that comes to mind for driving omnichannel success. So, you referred to you're having spent time right at the end of your Amazon career in Amazon ads. So it'll be unfair for me to get through an episode recording here on the CPG guys without mentioning the word retail media. So what is the importance of retail media, and can a brand realistically grow on platforms without it? And what are those, tactics that as an insider on retail media that you would recommend as best in class or must have for any brand?
Thank you so much. Even though it was shorter end of the experience in my total Amazon experience, out of 7 years, I spent about close to 1.5 years there. But it was probably the most profound experience I had within Amazon, just because Amazon ads, and I'm a little bit biased, it's probably the most advanced ad platform you'll find, because Amazon over various product offerings and time frame, it kind of honed in on consumers' path to purchase. How do consumers interact with product pages and then convert, and what part of the how do they what are the metrics that you you use to assess what's happening with those consumer purchases, and they so aptly use those metrics so that you can actually build a media strategy and execute end to end and achieve your goals and optimize. And you can have access to all that rich consumer behavior information through Amazon ads platform. So definitely it's a fascinating place. And one of the things that I learned when I was in Amazon ads is that we used to think about AMS, right? The old search tactics and just putting a lot of money in search. But you actually have to think about full funnel media. And Amazon ads have various products, but ways to engage in connected TV, going down to the mid funnel, as well as using some of those DSP retargeting, looking at more of a broader reach, more in conversion, but also in consideration phase, and then having always on media. You can't just turn on and off as you see fit, because there are times you lose efficiency when you do that. So we need to move away from just return on ad spend. It used to be just very ROAS type of, one metric that fits all kind of a thing. It's terrible actually, because if you think about that, you're kind of cutting yourself short in terms of your share of voice. How are you doing in the categories that you really play in? What's the competitive nature, right? There's real play of game theory there, if you think about it, and you can actually apply certain tactics in game theory to win or lose, or make others lose, and so on. So you have to kind of go beyond just ROAS. Think about new to brand. Think about click-throughs coming from adjacent categories, basket size, repeat purchases. All those metrics are super important. So having this full funnel media strategy and executing it patiently, looking at what's working, what's not working, doing some tests. I think that's really the success for me. But I see a real gap in the knowledge though out there. And I find it within my own organization, but also outside, where people really need to spend the time and learn about it before they can actually say that I know exactly what I'm doing, because it's complex. So knowledge. I go back to knowledge always. It's important.
I knew there was no way we'd get through this episode without referring to critical game theory, because Mir Zaman and I have talked about it before in past lives. So just a reminder for our audience, we're speaking to Mir Zaman, the VP of Commercial Operations at Spectrum Brands. So Mir, let's go back, stay on that omnichannel theme. And another favorite topic of ours, which, D2C is a word, I've always called it the kryptonite of large CPG, because the business model of D2C is not made for large CPG. So how are you coaching what is such a hard thing to do, which is the business of D2C to business leaders? And what matters? Is it content, reviews? Like, how does one work on this? And how are you doing this within Spectrum Brands?
We are on a very low attribution for DTC because, like, basically why you mentioned it. But DTC needs to be really purposeful, purpose driven in my mind. So if you're doing DTC, what's your goal? In many cases, it's a first party data gathering platform engagement, but you shouldn't stop there. It could be a viable commercialization or sales channel. But usually, in some cases, platforms like Amazon or Walmart or others may not give you the right avenue to engage with the consumers, with the product in a meaningful way that you want to be, because this product is disruptive or what have you. Like, we have something called glowfish, right? It's like a live fish that we have to sell to consumers. So when it comes to, like, with a platform, it can be very difficult because they have to hold the fish and they have to ship from there, and so on. So direct to consumer can be a very viable play in there. So you have to be first, once you decide your objective, then you have to really put the effort, because DTC cannot be done very well unless you have a supply chain capabilities, customer service capabilities, in how you service the customer, and making sure you own the value chain end to end, and have a good service for the customer, because they will become your brand ambassador at the end, right? So if you are not willing to put the dollars behind it, I think DTC can totally fail and actually hurt you in the long run. So that is my advice. That's how I go to market with my business unit leaders, and basically tell them that, let's first go to the drawing board and figure out, why are we doing DTC in this case? Why is this special case that we need to do it for? If not, there are various other light ways to engage with consumers where you don't have to commercialize, and you can still gather good engagement, have first party data. So then your objective is quite different versus the other one where you're actually using it as a viable sales channel.
Well addressed, Mr. Zaman, but I would have expected nothing else from you. So part of the DDC equation leads me to assortment, right? Is assortment kind of homogeneous across platforms, D2C, 1P, Amazon, Walmart, the whole gamut, club? Do they need to be specific for online versus offline? And what about price pack architecture? Is that the only way for e-com?
That's a very good question. When I was on Amazon, right, on the vendor management side, I'd go to, leaders like yourself on the other side in J&J or Revlon and say, hey, I want all of your products. I want everything that you sell. Actually, the meaning behind it is, I want your product doesn't mean any format you sell those in, right? Because it may not actually make sense, economically for me to sell those product. Like, especially think about dog food, right? Sometimes dog food can be very heavy. And if you're trying to ship it across the country, the shipping economics is not there for you, in a particular format that is doing well on club, maybe, and that may not work out. But does it mean that I don't want your dog food? I do. I just want to make sure that it's in a format that my consumers will be okay to purchase, and I can still make money out of it. So I think you cannot be homogeneous. You have to think about different formats and different way to approach the product when it comes to online versus offline versus click and collect or what have you. The other part is, there are different price sensitivity, of the consumer segment you're targeting. In some cases, consumers are real sensitive to price point. In some cases, they're not, and we've seen it through some tests with our own product lines, and it shows that something can be more expensive online, but the consumer segment you're targeting, they're okay with purchasing in a more expensive way in a different format because it's easier for them to store in their household or use the product. The other part is, when it comes to, so once you figure out what that rational, assortment that you want on a particular channel, you have to tie that back into the economics of it. So in the P&L, how is it playing out? Can you produce in the mass quantities? And if you're producing in mass quantities, what the price architecture is for you, right? So that is also a valid input that you have to consider. And then when you go to like price pack there's a method to madness, right? So a lot of the CPG companies, bring in multi-packs or different formats because they're trying to solve for different problems. So if you're shipping shampoo around, it could be quite expensive because it's like liquid, right? So, there are different formats, like it could be powder shampoo or dry shampoo, whatever, what have you. Also, you should look at consumer behavior. Are these products on some sort of a subscribe and save they're in a subscription mode? How often a consumer purchases your same product, in how many units, in what frequency? Those are inputs that tell you what is the right price spec architecture you should have, right? Once you know if it's a quantity of 2 or 3 that you should have, then you should look at the economics of it, shipping economics of it, and see that, okay, is there a price value equation for my customer to purchase this product from me, in this 3 unit quantity, right? And in many cases, you'll hit a home run if you do that due diligence instead of just hitting it in the dark and making some capex investment upstream because you have to make those packs, right, and things like that. So you need to be deliberate, but there's definitely a great use case, for you to look at certain part of your product portfolio and decide that you're going to be deliberate about making those stick online and have the economics work out for you and your platform, right? So that'd be my point of view there.
Complicated, but all doable, sounds like. I mean, if somebody put their mind to it, really, just like we've solved brick and mortar assortment over the course of time for different channels, what you're saying doesn't sound like to me like it's actually rocket science, no pun intended. Or maybe it is. That's why you're doing this job. What do you think?
It's not, it sounds complicated, but like any problem, you break it down in small chunks, you do some test and learn, you do a few and see the success of it, and then it becomes one of those things you can scale, right? So you gotta first try it though, And when I was in beauty, I did that on a customer product portfolio and took those signals and actually did a scenario analysis and found that significant of the product could be this multi-packs and do just fine when you actually start selling to consumers. So it's possible, but do we have the time? Do we have the prioritization there? And I think that's where guys like us or people who are practitioners in this space have to really evangelize on how to go about it. You just cannot be just big picture thinker. You actually have to go get down and dirty into the details and look at the numbers and see what will actually stick, and maybe having an open mind, do some test and learn, right? Because if you don't test it, you won't know all the downsides of it yet.
Fair enough. Very fair. If you don't test it, you won't know the downsides. I mean, straightforward. I'm going to go to a different area now because, we're still in the middle of a global, what I would call supply chain crisis these days. And so I want to go to strategic revenue management, also known as revenue optimization. And I feel, Mir, these kind of go hand in hand these days because you got to get your algorithm right, and supply chain passes right through the center of that. What skills in these areas are the ones that actually can run the marathon these days? And then how do supply chain and SRM intersect with each other?
Yeah, it's another great question. I think, I don't have all the answers because we're in the midst of supply chain crisis, so to speak, still. But what I can tell you, made some observations as we're trying to dig into it more and trying to get out of it. So, how did this transpire first? We started seeing, sourcing issues where factories are being shut down in Vietnam and China. We had material cost increase, inflation, as well as driving that to shipping costs, increases and so on. So what happened is we were in a kind of a just-in-time supply chain mode before, which we take out all kinds of inefficiencies from the overall supply chain, methods that we have, and then basically made it, kind of almost like, open to a lot of different external risks. For example, any macro thing that can happen that is beyond the control of the factory or what have you, right? And I think we kind of threw ourselves in a whack. But how to go and solve all that is, challenge everything. When you are in a crisis, like you look at the extremes of the situation, challenge everything, challenge all the assumptions you have, first of all. Not only in a sourcing, planning, and distribution, all three areas. Okay. And then go back to this customer segment I was talking about, the channel segments. Which are the important channels for you? Where you need to be not out of stock, where you have to make sure that your fill rate is at 95% or above, right? Where you want to make sure that your consumers are constantly engaging with that platform. So if you're not there, it's going to hurt you overall your brand equity, right? So working back from there, look at the economics there and the economic impact on your P&L. Work back from there and say, okay, this is where we need to optimize in our supply chain so we always have high availability here, right? So what kind of talent you really need for that? You can't really have a C player supply chain team anymore. You need that's gonna just drive you out of business. You need A players. The A players will be look like this. They will have high data, data availability. They're collecting all the data. They're analyzing. They're making decisions fast, and they're looking at optimization opportunities, but also not from a taking the cost out perspective, but also looking at can this take the risks that are outside beyond their control, where it may make sense to actually hold more inventory onshore versus holding no inventory onshore, things like that. So they have to rethink. But if you don't have those capabilities where you're data driven and constantly challenging yourself, doing some more experimentation, you won't survive the future challenges. And there'll be no shortage of challenges. They're going to keep coming back to us. We have the Ukraine war going on right now. There are various things can happen. So I think it's a wake up call for supply chain teams all across CPGs. Not just one isolated company. And in various companies, we're gonna have the same call outs. And then the last part I want to make is we should always think about supply chain working with revenue and profit management. So there goes, what should be your overall impact to the P&L? Because at end of the day, supply chains exist to serve the P&L, right? So having that optimization exercise between those two teams will be quite vital, and it has to be at the SKU level. You cannot do it as a product category level or product group level. It has to be done at the SKU level.
Indeed, Mir, applying, I've been in trainings recently, and another guest that I talked to earlier this week, we had a lot of conversation about SKU level, the future of merchandising being SKU level versus category management, like moving away from category-based merchandising to item-based merchandising, which I think is a completely different skill set, because item merchandising is you're really fighting an algorithm or learning an algorithm versus category management, you're managing the space. Any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah. I mean,
You have experience doing this, so.
Yeah, I mean, at Amazon, we're trained to look at SKU level economics all the time. So our conversations are usually around that. But going into a CPG, what I found is that is not really a traditional practice. So it's a bit of a learning muscle for us. But people in general, they are open to ideas and open to understanding why certain things are not working. So when you actually look at a SKU level view, you see that your methods that you've applied from a category level or subcategory level quite breaks down when it comes to SKU level. Actually, those assumptions don't hold anymore. So if so, it's always the 80-20 rule in my mind. So not everything needs to be at the SKU level at the onset. Obviously, that's the nirvana. That's where you want to be. But you need to start at least building the top 20-30% of your portfolio that's driving majority of your revenue, and then put systems in place so that you are able to query at the SKU level across different channels what's happening. And if there is large variances that can drive your ASP down, then or average selling price down, then that you're going to lose some dollars, and there'll be cannibalization from one channel to another. And end of the day, you'll be the loser. So it needs to be thought of in that sense, right? and applied accordingly. But those are capabilities that you have to build over time. It's non-existent in most places. Even though, Amazon built it with that in mind, so Amazon already had it inherent in the systems that we had built in Amazon. But in the CPGs, I don't see that. And maybe in your experience, you've seen better, but I'm not seeing a lot of that yet.
Yeah, neither am I, to be honest with you. And it's a learning curve every single day. Even for me personally, Mir, I've been in the category management world most of my life, and it's a skill set I'm acquiring. Dealing with Amazon, working with you, I learned a little bit about how to do item level management, moving with an algorithm as opposed to a category, but long, long way to go. And speaking to that, we will close this episode by asking you our favorite question, which we do of all guests, which is we're future forward here on the podcast. So it's 2022. We're in the middle of a global supply chain crisis. Commodity hedging and management has become so volatile, we can't even use those words hedge anymore. That's causing commodity costs to increase. We've never seen supply chain the way it is these days. What is your prediction for the CPG industry?
I don't know about you. I have to go with metaverse. I'm super excited about it. I think, and I come from a problem that I faced when I was in ads, is that a lot of the search starts, 70% of it is search driven, right? So we weren't getting a lot of engagement on browse and stuff, but metaverse kind of solves that problem, brings online and virtual world close to the offline and the shelves, right? So I see a lot of opportunity. I know the technology has a lot of kinks to be worked out, and they're is still progressing. But you'll probably see the journey start from luxury products, where you start with NFTs associated with the product, and then start to engage people, go beyond avatars, and start to have a real person. Eventually when the technology, and the facial expressions and so on, because you need all those to engage. And I think it can really be an area where CPGs will need to think about and start to engage in a technological way, think about the product features, So I'm super excited about it. I think we're a few years out for sure. But why not? Why not go all the way, right, in the virtual world? And look at this. The COVID kind of helped us move far away from workplaces. People are being remote. Do they want to drive 40 minutes to a shopping mall still? I don't know. I mean, it's going to eventually change. So I'm excited about it. Maybe I'm far-fetched, but I'm just a technology guy, so I love the technology space that I see right now. So
he calls himself a technology guy. First, he was a rocket scientist in mission control of NASA during the launch of space shuttles, then an actual item merchant on Amazon, now managing categories and creating capabilities for Spectrum Brands. For all our audience, you can find all our content by simply going to a browser and typing cpgguys.com, and you can get to all our links and really stay in touch with what's going on here at the CPG Guys that way. But the best way to kind of keep yourself informed and keep us informed of who you want on the show, what topics you want on the show, and who gets to actually come is by going to ratethispodcast.com/CPG Guys, where you can leave us a rating and tell us how we're doing, and a review perhaps, which tells us the quality of the show and what changes you want to see. Mir, I can't thank you enough for joining the podcast. Of course, all the links to your LinkedIn profile and Spectrum Brands will be in the digital liner notes of this podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Shri. It's been a pleasure, and we'll talk soon.
And for our audience, a reminder to check out our partner podcast, Over the Atlantic, FMCG Guys. And we will see you soon on another episode of the CPG Guys.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPG Guys LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPG Guys LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPG Guys LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPG Guys LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.